What's in the box? Welcome to episode 2 of What's in the Box.
How you doing? Yeah,
I'm good.
yeah,
I'm
me
looking
too.
forward to this one.
So much. Hello, dear listener, viewer. Hopefully the same person, or even two would be better. I am Gluttony, and sitting opposite me is John Doe's missing fingerprints.
Oh, that felt like sloth.
It's one of those things that I spend all week thinking of that bit and then forgetting to watch the film, and then like, But thankfully, I've seen this one about, I don't know, maybe 100 times, which is really quite sad.
It's not sad. I'm more intrigued as to the version that you've got. That's the one.
The version I've got. Right, okay. Is that the adult version of Seven?
Seven extended cut.
Right. So yeah, tonight's film in the What's in the Box discussing David Fincher's films is Seven. A couple of things to put around Seven before we start talking about the film. Go back to episode 1 of What's in the Box, and it was the disastrous Alien 3. Fincher somehow managed to get Seven. Not only did he manage to get Seven, but he created what's currently ranked 20th greatest films of all time in the IMDb top 250. It is seminal when you look at cop films. Its impact across music and cinema and TV is still being felt today. It's 30 years old next year, which makes me feel really old. Just a little bit about 1995 as well. You know, obviously the film wasn't shot in 95, and there was no way they could have projected what a year 1995 would have been for the world. But, you know, if you look at 1995, we had the Rwandan genocide, the Se7en attacks in Japan, and the Oklahoma bombing in the States. So the world was in a fairly dark place. And then this film came out. And I think part of the reason that it caught the attention so much, particularly of the critics, because it became a much bigger hit when it got to like home video, as it was then, and DVD or DVDA. It really just set itself up, because the world was like getting ready for a millennium. There were religious groups everywhere go, "Oh no, the end is nigh, the end is nigh." And then you have this film that pops up and goes, "Yeah, the end is nigh."
And that's probably why a number of test screenings, audiences walked out. Isn't there the one I read that Fincher went to one, and an audience member walked out at the end and said, "Everyone that made that film,
totally."
should go to hell."
And the thing is that there's nothing overtly religious in the film. You know, the Seven Deadly Sins is more than probably the closest it gets to religion. There are a couple of crucifixes in John Doe's apartment, but there's nothing that says his actions are because of religion. His actions are because of the man he is.
The man he is, and society at the time. It's a sociological documentary as well of the pits of depravity that the human race is going into at that time. Because you think you've come out of, I mean, this is harking right back, and apologies, probably going off on a tangent. But you've got coming out of World War II, you've got the 60s and 70s as one revolution, you've got 80s as another projection forward, and the 90s is yet another big propulsion forward. But we've had that revolution, and now the revolution has gone into this mess of what these seven deadly sins promote, basically. And that's why John Doe does what he does, because it's a commentary of our depravity.
So for anyone that's not seen the film, it's set in an unknown city where it rains all the time, and there are car alarms, and what the Americans call U-Haul alarms going all the time. It focuses on two characters, one played by Morgan Freeman, one played by Brad Pitt. Morgan Freeman is obviously the elder detective. Pitt is the younger, the eager detective. And Brad Pitt has a young wife played by Gwyneth Paltrow, and we'll get to Gwyneth Paltrow in a minute. Not for the obvious reasons. And this Morgan Freeman's character is on his 7-day countdown to retirement when the first of the 7 deadly sins is discovered. There's a lot of 777 in this film. And the film just basically centers around that attempt to cross those 7 days to solve the murders. To say that this is one of the best scripts from a cop thriller procedural for the past 30 years is no understatement. It is so well written.
The wonderful Andrew Kevin Walker, who goes on to have a very meshed relationship throughout the years with David Fincher. I mean, it's the start of to quote Bogard, this is a start of a beautiful friendship.
And it's the film where a lot of friendships were forged, because when the film starts, it starts with in Morgan Freeman's apartment, and it's setting the scene. One of the things that you'll notice when you watch the film is the directness, how obviously polar opposites Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt are. So you look at Morgan Freeman's apartment, it's all orderly, it's all nice and tidy. Everything he does is about process and protocol and order. And everything Brad Pitt does is about emotion and impatience, which makes Brad Pitt the easy target towards the end of the film, because it's his emotionality which catches him out ultimately. If he wasn't such a fucking hothead, then maybe he wouldn't be in the he might not be a widower, put it that way.
Yeah, it's the frivolity of youth, isn't it? He's young and inexperienced, and you've got the 7 days to retirement elder statesman. I think it's brilliant casting, and when I was looking into the film, there was a wonderful thing where the studio executives were unhappy about having Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt because they felt a coloured cop and a white cop harked back to the Lethal Weapon, yin and yang, which I thought was quite an interesting analogy. I wouldn't have put that there. I thought it was a fantastic pairing, and one that almost didn't.
Well,
happen.
when you think,
or wasn't the pairing,
because it was Denzel Washington turned down the Morgan Freeman character, and you're just like, because he went on to, I'll talk a little bit about this in more detail later, but he went on to star in a film called Fallen, which was about, about a serial killer who's being executed, death row, being executed, and the essence of his evil leaves his body at the time of his death, and then follows through different bodies. But that was the film he did instead of Seven. And you got to think to yourself, well, come on, Denzel. And I know as you get a little bit older, you make some really, really good films, but that was a bad one. Yeah. Just harking back to the relationships, this is where Trent Reznor, 9 Inch Nails came into the world of Fincher, and that amazing use of Closer. It's a remix of Closer, which is used beautifully, but it's those opening credits, which some people reckon have got a few subliminal messages in them, which we can talk about if we get time. But it's the use of those credits, which took about a month to make, I believe, which wouldn't surprise me.
And almost weren't the credits.
Yeah.
It was a last minute budgetary thing. It was meant to be going around Morgan Freeman's apartment, posting things about his retirement house and all these bits and pieces. But because of budget, they couldn't film those additional bits. So it became the intro that we have now, which is the first time I saw that, I was just like goosebumps, because it is just incredible.
Sublime. It really is.
And we'll speak about the outro later, because I'll just give a complete.
The thing about that intro, though, is that I can't recall where a piece of popular music, a song, has been used to such effective dramatic effect as Closer and those opening credits. You know, you well, just about is an exaggeration, but there have been many, 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 many imitators of those opening credits over the years since then.
Gosh. Oh, you could see it. You can see it in TV popular culture now. It still resonates to this day. That use of remix of a certain type of track is
well, the biggest one that springs to mind was a TV show with David Boreanaz and somebody else who was Boreanaz, called Bones, and their opening title credits was written by a band or a composer called the Crystal Method, but it was a direct rip-off of Se7en at the opening credits. And you think, obviously it was sanitized to be TV friendly, but it was all the jumps, the reverses, the film sprocket bumpers. It was everything the same, and the music was like a pop version of Closer. Yeah, so it's
well. I mean, as you know, Phil, because you've known me for this length of time, when I did my university dissertation, I did a massive section on Se7en and the music used in Se7en. And you look at the way that is put together, and if you look at the film Hannibal, there are certain reflections within the title sequence of that. And I, as one of the projects I had to do, I rescored the intro to Hannibal. And I took complete inspiration from the Nine Inch Nails Closer, because it's not so much music, it's more sound. It's soundscape, sound effect, which is a lot about the score of Se7en. Because Howard Shore, who wrote the music for Se7en, hired, because of his work previous to that, Silence of the Lambs, had written an introduction score to go over the title sequence, but it was rejected for that version of Closer because of the reworking they had to do of the original sequence that had Morgan Freeman. So when we talk about Se7en throughout the entire production process, there's lots of happy accidents throughout the making of it that make for
and there's some unintentional mistakes as well in the film, but we won't hark on about those much. So we've got the opening sequence, and then immediately we're thrown into the world of the first murder, which is gluttony. And this is where Fincher really sets his stall out here. He says, you don't know where you are, so it's an unnamed city. It's going to rain. It's going to be dark. I think they used a special process where they stripped the silver nitrate out of the film or something, which really brought the tones down. And then it showed straight away there, because you've got the Brad Pitt and the Morgan Freeman characters, and you've got the different ways of the way that they look at the crime scene. So you've got Morgan Freeman being polite to the beat cop as they walk in, but then you've got Brad Pitt being rude to him. You've got Morgan Freeman looking at the body. You've got Brad Pitt pacing up and down. And that is throughout. It goes down to things like the ties. Morgan Freeman ties a tie. Brad Pitt's got a pre-knotted tie on a hanger. So that's one thing that maybe doesn't get caught unless you're like really, really watching the film. But I think when I first saw that scene, because I try to steer away from watching trailers of the film. If I really want to see a film, I don't watch the trailers, because trailers nowadays, even back then, they just give away too much. And I didn't know what to expect at the first crime scene. And then when I saw it and he's got barbed wire around his legs and his hands, and you think to yourself, oh shit, it's going to be one of those films. But it was insane. The attention to detail that, when you think that the Gluttony's apartment is effectively dark, it's not very well lit at all. But the attention to detail, to the number of cans of food, that have been made and have been put on the side, or it's just incredible. And you know, when you first see that face being lifted out of the bowl of pasta, it's not very pleasant. You know.
Well, let's face it, none of the film is pleasant.
It's surprisingly though that there is quite a bit of humour in it.
Well, maybe Gwyneth Paltrow's ending.
There's actually quite a bit of humour in it, and some of it is unintentional because.
There are. I mean, the one line that I still quote to this day is
Marquis de Sade, whatever. Yeah.
What a throwaway line, and made on the spot because he just couldn't get it right, and it's made on the spot, and it is just.
And that again shows the difference in education between the Morgan Freeman character.
Yeah.
But it's like the comedy comes in two ways. You've got Brad Pitt so eager to make comment all the time that, you know, just because the film's got a library card doesn't make him Yoda. That's actually quite funny, that. Yeah. But then there's the unintentional humor of Brad Pitt where he goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've got ourselves a homicide," and that is
the hammy pit.
Some of the worst acting ever. You know, it's up there with. Oh, shit, I can't think of a bad actor now. Oh, Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. Oh, she's bad. Oh. She's bad. God almighty.
But if you think about it, under his belt at that time, he had the successes of. Thank you. He had the success of Interview with the Vampire, and was it
Legends of the Fall
through it at that time?
And
Legends of the Fall, that's the one. Thank you.
Well, I think because that
and a tiny bit
because isn't 7 Years in Tibet on the sign on a cinema as they're going in, as they walk past, there's a pan shot past, and I'm pretty sure that 7 Years in Tibet is actually showing at the cinema. Yeah, I could be right. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah, he didn't have a great deal of acting credentials, but I've got a bit of a conspiracy theory here. There are, I think there's 3 or 4 scenes where Brad Pitt gives a line reading which is awful. Okay, it's flat. There's nothing to it. It's, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've got ourselves a homicide." There's 3 or 4 of them. I reckon they were all filmed on the same day or the same couple of days. Yeah. And he was having a bad week or a Beano with his girlfriend or something was going on. Maybe he wasn't needed for the majority of the day and he just came in, do one line and go. Maybe it was the 800th take. There was just something because for the rest of the film, he's actually quite good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It might have been just busting his chops a bit to get into that flow. And because of the budget of it and because of the shooting schedule, they just had to make it run. Because if you look at the casting, Kevin Spacey was a last-minute addition because of his fee. Because he was the fee and Pitt himself took to negotiating down. And then he was literally in it. He was given a call on a Sunday, in to shoot on a Tuesday, I think, and did seven ironically 7 days shooting. But and also said he would do it, but he didn't want any billing on the
which I think was really clever. Yeah, I think
brilliant.
Yeah, it would have
absolutely.
It wouldn't have ruined the film, but it would have changed the dynamic of the film completely if you'd known Kevin Spacey was in it. You're 20 minutes into the film. You haven't seen Kevin Spacey, therefore Kevin Spacey is the killer. And that would have changed it.
But it was his knowledge saying, I'm in these 2-3 films that are about to be released.
Yeah.
If they go big, it's going to ruin it. And he had the foresight and gut hunch or whatever it is to say, don't do it. And I kudos to the man for that. We'll put a pin in all his recent activity.
Yeah, I think it's
for now. But
I think it shows his mind is always working. Put it that way. Yeah, he's always looking for an angle. Is our Kev, Yeah, and not always the polite angle. So, because Pitt was also instrumental in keeping the original ending as well. Yeah, as
yes, yep,
yeah,
and Freeman as well, Freeman and Pitt,
because the original.
The
Oh, the original
studios wanted
ending.
to change it.
For me, it's the best ending of a film just about ever. Yeah.
Because when we're researching this, I was reading up that in test screenings, Fincher told the test screening cinemas to keep the lights down when it ended because it has that abrupt.
The helicopters
needed it black. They all ignored it and put the lights up. So all the audience came out and said, "What ending is that?" Dog's got a lot to say on this film.
He
I
loved it.
agree with
if only there was somebody else in the house that could control the dog. Yeah, I think it really helped having that common mentality between the stars and the director in tackling the studio, because obviously Fincher had been so badly burned in Alien 3 by the studio interference that it must have felt really good for him to be able to just lean back a little bit and say not even say to the stars, but them being there for him. And I think that is why Seven escalates itself away from everything to do with Alien 3 and allows him to put that Fincher blueprint down, that impossible level of detail, that feeling that you have when you're watching one of his films. I made a couple of notes when I was watching it the other night. When they break into the sloth apartment, the number of those little pine air fresheners, not only hanging up, but on the floor, is incredible. Right. It's absolutely incredible. And I don't know how people didn't vomit from that smell.
That that moment, that scene in that film, jump scares are jump scares. That is the one piece of cinema where I have levitated out of my seat. You do not see that coming.
No.
And then I just jumped. Yeah. I was gone, and I was like, I don't know if I can handle the rest of this film.
Yeah.
That is one of those most haunting pieces of cinema I think I've ever seen. It's so well done.
Yeah,
so well done.
It's a screenwriting trick that's used all the way through the film, where they set the scene and they show you what the expected outcome is, and then turn it around and to lead you into the next scene. So you go into Sloth's apartment, and you see him lying there all wasted away. So your expectation is he's dead, and then you have all that, he's dead, blah, 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 and then he's not, which is turning it around, and then get an ambulance, which takes you into the next scene. And they use that trick all the way through the film. This is what you're going to get. It's the same when they show Eli Gould's wife the pictures of his office. Look at the pictures. I can't see anything. I don't see anything different. So the expectation is then, but then there's, what's that? And then the picture's upside down, which hooks you into the next scene. So it's beautifully written. It really is, and beautifully cast.
Yeah, to come back to the casting in a minute, but I think the one scene where you actually see the humanitarian result of a sin is the one. I can't even describe it because it is just, it's horrible. You don't. I think you don't see anything.
Yeah.
You just see the guy sat in a chair with the covers over him, and he's got the knife strapped to his knee, and he's made to do unspeakable
things. Yeah.
And it's as he's recording it, he goes, "Oh my god, he made me do it! Oh my god, he made me do it! Oh my god!" And it's that's the bit that sort of puts it into. You can see the real world effect of the sins being played out, and that's the one bit that really hit me. I just thought this is getting too much.
It's funny, the actor Leland Orser went on to be in a he did lots of other films, and he still works, but he did 2 which are to some degree rip-offs of Seven. So the first one was A Bone Collector with Denzel Washington and Angelina Jolie. So he played the big bad in that. Okay, and if you look at the credits and the feel and it's a very Seven-ish film. Yeah. But there was a film with Christopher Lambert, the guy that played Highlander in the original, called Resurrection. Okay.
Oh gosh, don't.
And it is such a bag of shit. But it's
it's awful. I've seen some of that.
But it's such a copy. It's set over Easter, where a serial killer is killing people and taking body parts to rebuild the body of Christ. And Leland Dawson's in that. So with all those attempts to recreate Seven or to copy it or to be influenced by it came in varying degrees of success. Well, it's never been equaled, and it has never influenced a film of its equal. So
no, it has. I mean, it's gone on to inspire and influence.
Yeah, but I don't think
nothing has touched Seven.
No, and I don't think anything in that realm has touched it either since then. I think there are some very, very, very good films, but for me, Seven is the ultimate serial killer film.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I'm going to bring it back round to the casting here, is a film that will come on to later in the series, but is Zodiac, the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah.
And the slight resonance of that even in Seven, because you're looking at the casting for within Seven, they wanted Ned Beatty.
Yeah, Ned Beatty, yeah.
Yeah, because of how he resembles the sketches of the Zodiac Killer. But he declined it because he said it's one of the sickest things he's ever read. So he said no. But about that character is, and I texted you earlier about this, doing my due diligence, the casting for Spacey's role, and one I'd be quite interested to see, even if they did some test shots for it.
Yeah.
But it's Michael Stipe.
Yeah.
Michael Stipe. I could sort of see it in a way, but
yeah, if Michael Stipe was an actor, he'd just be the oldie version of John Malkovich, wouldn't
he? He would.
Yeah,
he really would. It's the end of humanity as we know it. I feel fine. You're welcome. I'm here a week. Tip your waitress.
Try the fish. That's bloody awful. That is. Yeah, we talked before briefly about the use of music in the film. I think one of the standout moments for me is when they're meeting the FBI agent to get the library records. And Haircut 100, Fantastic Day is playing in the background. I just think it's brilliant. I just think it's so good. It's just so clever that you quite, you're really in there, but in the back of your mind, somebody's playing Fantastic Day. You're like, yeah. But I think the thing that Fincher did with the John Doe character and the John Doe casting is very rare in Hollywood films. 4 years earlier, they had Silence of the Lambs, and Silence of the Lambs that character was a cocktail of different serial killers, beautifully portrayed by Anthony Hopkins. But it was a cocktail. It was amalgamation. And I've said this to somebody. I said last week when I was talking to my guest last week that in parts of Silence of the Lambs, you're rooting for Hannibal Lecter because he's so suave, because Hollywood has a tendency to portray serial killers as some kind of anti-hero. Yeah, they're doing it for a reason or whatever. But because he's so intelligent and suave and calm, you're thinking, is that surely can't be right? But then you get to John Doe, and they don't do that with John Doe. He isn't made up of 4 or 5 different serial killers. He is who he is, just because they make no attempt to explain it, not a sausage, except in the graphic novels that followed the film years later, which was a huge mistake, where they tried to show John Doe as a child growing up in a very, very strict Catholic family with beatings.
See, I don't want that. I don't want the backstory. He is. That's the beauty of the film. You see him as he is at that moment.
Yeah, and that's all that matters.
And he wants to be found. He wants the notoriety. He wants the infamy of it, because the one scene, it's my handle now on this conversation.
Yeah.
Moment he's in that police station, he just goes, "Detective, detective, detective."
Yeah. Have you ever seen anything like that in a film before?
No.
I can't recall seeing anything like that in a film.
That stuck with me because it is so good.
Yeah,
it's so good, and that is a testament to Spacey as an actor. He was a fantastic actor, and straight out of the gate, I think that was his prime, because he knew how to deliver that. Interestingly, most of the film, that's not him. It's somebody put in as a bit part to do all the back shots and everything, because they hadn't cast the role.
Yeah.
And, it was only cast, like I was saying earlier, for those few days where he actually came and did sort of on camera stuff.
And you'll notice in some other review videos or talking heads about the film. Now, I don't want to be disparaging about anyone, but there are people that claim that John Doe is outside Wild Bill's, as they're inside talking about the creation of the weapon, the tube. That he's seen walking backwards and forwards outside the shop while they're inside. I don't know. Well, it sure shit wasn't.
I can see the logic. I can see the thinking behind that, and that would sort of make sense. But
there's a shadowy character outside the door while they're inside.
All I can see them in the background. I'm looking forward to the 4K version.
Yeah,
when it arrives, because taking it from the original negative, they're enhancing it for 4K, and they're omitting certain bits that shouldn't be there when they re-enhance the negative. So I'm really looking forward to that one. That's going to be so that'll probably put to bed some of those questions.
Only another 10 months to wait for it.
I know.
Crazy. So we cycle through quite quickly. Gluttony. Then we go to greed, which is the killing of the district attorney. Where do we go after greed? We don't go to pride, do we? Oh, I should know this off the top of my head. No, it's sloth. He goes through 7 sins in some order, which I can't recall at the moment.
I can't recall either. And both you and I have watched it quite recently.
Oh, yeah. So we go through and we see how structured and organized John Doe is in the killings. You know, that to kill the DA, he must have, to use Hollywood parlance, he must have cased the joint, knew when he could get in and he wouldn't be disturbed, that he knew how much time he had. Same with gluttony, you know, keeping somebody detained and doing what he did to him. And when he did then show up at the police station, it was a big moment in the film, but looking back, I wasn't surprised, because he was in complete control of everything.
Everything had its place. He had a timeline planned and plotted.
Yeah.
He turned up there because he had to get them so he could get in the car to do the big reveal of her pretty little head.
Yeah.
He had to do that. So it had to get to that point via his timeline mapping. So, you know, the chap wasting away, that's a long period of time. So that's his long form death. That was planned over a long time and had to play out over time. Whereas everything else then had its quick succession.
Yeah.
So
and wrath and envy are accelerated because the two detectives actually they don't stumble across, but they find his lair and disrupt his plans to some degree.
So and even the ending, that there were different endings that were touted about, that, you know, one shooting the other, or lots played out. But Pitt and Freeman said we're sticking to the original ending that's written in the script. Which, hats off, like you were saying earlier, that's actors and directors teaming together for the end result. Because when you sign up to a film after reading a script, that's what you're signing up to.
You'd hope
for a studio
so.
to, you hope so. For a studio to walk in and go, no, we now want them to do this, and you can't kill him because it'll lead to this. It has to have this ultimate conclusion. You're like, no, it has to have this nihilistic conclusion because that's what it needs. Sorry, it doesn't leave it open to a sequel. Marvel.
Yeah, the start of the final scene contains one of the funniest jokes in the film as well, where they pull up and they see something. They see something at the side of the road, and Morgan Freeman goes over and goes, "It's a dead dog," and very, very dryly, Kevin Spacey just goes, "Well, I didn't do that," and it's just like,
that is brilliant. I applaud that one. And it's the little smirk he gives when he says the line as well.
In my little brain, I like to think he ad-libbed that.
Exactly how I feel about it. I really hope that was ad-libbed.
And that Fincher was, and the camera starts shaking 3 seconds later because Fincher's laughing so hard. It's funny as well. We talked about the sloth apartment before. There's a shot in the sloth apartment which is replicated later in the film. When they kick the door down, where they go, swap before dicks and kick the door, that beautiful framing shot where you've got all of these SWAT guys, shotguns and pistols pointed, is then replicated later when they find John Doe's apartment with Brad Pitt kicking the door down, and they're framed in his doorway. It's such the level of detail in this. There's a shot after Brad Pitt chases John Doe away from his apartment, out the apartment building, down the side, and Brad Pitt is injured, lying in a puddle. Not only the detail in the puddle as John Doe approaches, but as his gun is lowered down, his Beretta is lowered down, the individual drops of water that are running down the gun. You're thinking, holy shit, I bet he took about 80 takes to get that water the way he wanted it. Yeah, more water.
It's interesting. The level of detail not only applies to what is visual, but aural as well. Because you turned me on to that when you had that, and this is what I was on about when we started this.
Can I just say, I didn't turn you on. I pointed it out to you. Turning you on was a different film.
You made a very obtuse, a big observation.
Obtuse obfuscation.
But it's when you had the Laserdisc version of this,
which I still have down there.
And you played to me, and I was like, I totally get what you mean, because this is when home cinema wasn't then what it is now.
No,
and you had bucket loads of equipment, and you had bucket loads of equipment. It's fantastic because I didn't have any of this, and you played it to me, and there's bits where they swoop with sheets, and it goes, and the audio goes
the fingerprint.
over you.
It's the fingerprint guy. Chasing around the surround.
Absolutely blew my mind, and that was what informed me onto the music of it, of how I could listen in a different way, and why I wrote a dissertation about the sound design and the music of Se7en, because it is just phenomenal, and that's what makes David Fincher such a fantastic filmmaker, is the attention to detail, not just about the way the film is shot visually, but every single element. And there are elements from Se7en that are transported into Panic Room, I see specifically. There's a direct correlation between certain ways they're shot and the sound design of both of those that resonates. But I just think the way that the sound and the way the music is done, because Howard Shore, orchestra of over 100 people, and they use bent saws and loads of really strange elements to make this soundtrack that is it's just it's a dirge when you really listen to it. And there are a couple of motifs around Brad Pitt's wife, etc. through it. But it's just this big, long, droning sounds.
Yeah.
And for the time, it was a film that, although we've spoken about popular music and it's got Closer and things, it's a film that bucked the trend of having to have that soundtrack, because that was a big thing throughout 80s cinema and early 90s cinema. It had to have a sellable soundtrack so that more money could be made. But on music just now as well is perfect ending track.
Oh,
David Bowie's Heart's Filthy Lesson, from an album that he had to make himself and fund himself and put out on his own label because no other studio would touch it. And it's a mishmash of an album, which kind of resonates with Se7en as well. There's a very similar motif about it.
Yeah.
But that version of Heart's Filthy Lesson, which 9 Inch Nails themselves have remixed,
brilliant.
Chef's kiss.
It was
superb.
Yeah, that was the first time I'd ever heard that song. So you've got the end of Se7en, screen goes black, and you're sitting there, and you're breathing, you're just, woof, dum, 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 and it starts, and the credits are going up in reverse. And I sat down like, holy shit. Went out at the auditorium, went to the ticket booth, got another ticket, and went straight back in and watched it again. It was just incredible.
But it's got such a great opening line, that song.
Yeah.
It's always a dark and empty street. Yeah. Oh, there you go. Straight away. That's Se7en.
Yeah. That is exactly it. And I think there was that. I don't know who suggested that track to Fincher. I would imagine that, knowing Fincher's knowledge of music, that he chose that track himself.
Or maybe it was Trent Reznor, because that David Bowie and him had been starting to work at that time together. But 9 Inch Nails were on the tour of the Outside album with David Bowie, so I wonder if there was some of that cross-reference there.
Yeah, but it did for a moment, because it was Bowie, because he's been one of the biggest names in rock and roll for 60 years. It did go dangerously close, just for a moment, to the Celine Dion song at the end of the film. We mentioned last week Alien 3 needed a big song at the end of it. Maybe Fincher taking that lesson.
But the 9 Inch Nails song at the start and the David Bowie song at the end, they're not sellable songs. They're not top 10 territory. No. Heart's Filthy Lesson is a fucking brilliant song.
Oh, it is.
I love that album. It's a very difficult album to listen to start to finish, because it's a sort of weird cyber rock up. It's all weird as hell, but it's fantastic. But it's not a sellable track. It's not going to get you number one to promote a film. It's an anti-song, as is Closer. Closer, I want to fuck you like an animal. I want to fit. It's a horrid song. It's off.
Thank you. That's the worst chat up line I've ever had. Thank you.
It's off one of the sickest albums.
That's what she said.
Of all time. It's the most anti-music that you can get, and the Downward Spiral is basically Se7en, but in audio.
and that's why those songs were chosen, because Se7en as a film isn't about hope. Se7en as a film is about reality. You can have hope, and it ends with Morgan Freeman's character having some hope, but you're going to get your eyes poked out, or you're going to get your head cut off, or something nasty is going to happen to you, because the city in which Se7en exists is a city of absolutes. There's no petty crime there. All crime is grand crime. They never say, "Oh, somebody got robbed." Well, no, he got robbed and they poked his eyes out for fun while they were doing it, and you're like, really?
It's almost like Se7en and Gotham. It's like the detectives in Gotham.
Yeah.
It's that sort of level of depravity.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be surprised if you saw Joaquin Phoenix Joker walk round the corner.
Yeah, I think it's like Gotham, but if Gotham was having a really bad day.
So it's New York.
Yeah, because I think what would happen is that Batman would walk around the corner and go, fuck that, I'm not trying to sort this shit out, I'm off.
Yeah. He's got a knife on his knee.
Oh, God. Yeah, so one of the most effective ones, I thought, and you see nothing apart from the aftermath, is Pride, where he cuts the
love?
He cuts the model's nose off.
Yeah.
And glues pills in one hand and a phone in the other hand, call for help and be ugly for the rest of your life, or take the pills and die beautiful. I thought that was very of the time, because you mentioned.
I don't think it's of the time. I think it could resonate now.
No,
I think it resonates now.
No, it does resonate now, but it was of the time because you've just watched the Supermodels TV show on Apple, yeah, and that was about the rise of beauty.
Yeah, it is at that time. You're right. It's early to mid 90s was when it was prevalent. So you are right.
So you've got that kind of like John Doe's backlashes to the banality of beauty, saying that if all you are is that outer shell, then you are nothing.
It's almost like there's another film starting to register here. That, I'm getting something about a club of men fighting.
Don't mention it. First rule, don't mention it.
I've forgotten the first and second rule.
Oh dear, I don't know. Yeah. So we have Pride. We have then a bit of a run-in where the characters all clash in outside his apartment. There's the famous story about Brad Pitt hurting himself in a stunt, therefore he wears a cast for the rest of the film. Before we move on to much further, I've got to confess, and I've confessed this to you, that I tend to skip over any scenes with Gwyneth Paltrow in it because I think she's friggin' awful in this film.
Have you seen the alternate castings for it?
Yeah. I think genuinely, I understand why he put the character Tracy in there to show the heart of Brad Pitt's character.
Humanizes him.
Yeah. But he could have done it with a lot less screen time for Gwyneth Paltrow. Because she is shocking in it.
But then you wouldn't have the compassion when she loses her pretty little head.
It's the only thing in the film that bothers me is the fact that Brad Pitt is so pretty and Gwyneth Paltrow is so pretty. The rest of the film is so dirty and ugly. Yeah, it doesn't make me care more for Gwyneth Paltrow because she's pretty. I'm going to care for her because she's the lead character's wife and he cares for her. But she sits there and she thinks, oh, David, oh, William, oh, it's just like, shh, please, shh.
Well, the alternatives were Robin Wright, I've read, and Christina Applegate. Christina Applegate, I could sort of see that one. That's quite an interesting one.
I honestly don't think it would make any difference about who was cast in the role. I just think there's too much of the character. Yeah, Robin Wright would have been bloody awful, and she only was in contention for it because she'd just done Boomerang with Eddie Murphy or something stupid like that.
It was of a time.
Well, it was of a time, wasn't it? And even Christina Applegate at that time in 94, 95, she was only getting it because at that time she was considered eye candy.
Well, a name at that point, in the indie cinema side.
It didn't need a name. It needed somebody very briefly for you to attach to. Yeah, you needed to attach more to Brad Pitt's character than to his wife, and I just think it's the way that Fincher shot her, because he shoots the scenes with.
She was decapitated.
Hey. He shoots the scenes with Gwyneth Paltrow in such a sympathetic way. It's very softly lit.
But that is again a trope, isn't it, of the time? The female lead.
It doesn't fit with the film. I'm using
Dr. Evil quotes here for those who can't see.
Yeah, was that the female lead or the female lead? Are you going to use them the right way around? Come on.
Oh, I'm woke, but I'm just not that.
He uses air quotes in all the wrong places, just like Joey.
I am Joey. Yeah, I do get what you mean. I mean, I'm not a lover of her in anything she's done. She's more of a chewer of scenery, to be fair.
Yeah.
From my opinion. I mean, even when she turns up in the Iron Man films, I'm like, oh, for the love of God, no, make it stop. I just don't look. Go and do your vag smelling candles. That's fine. But
it's not that it's her; it's the way the character is treated, and I think that it took.
No, I don't. I agree with you to a point.
Yeah.
One does agree to disagree, and disagrees to agree.
Yeah.
I think to a point, yes, there is that. It's the way it's favourably shot, but I think that plays into the having that home life and normality to Mills, because throughout he is a little bit hammy, he's a little bit gung ho as a detective, but when he's with Gwyneth, that he's more relaxed. And there is that humanistic side, and there is that family side, which is, oh, she didn't tell you?
Yeah.
That little surprise ending that makes you go that little bit more at the end when, she's headless, but, oh, did you know that he's taken the baby as well? Which is, a whole other, what other sin has that created?
I think that Fincher took a while to learn how to portray female characters in films. Because if you think about, you've got Se7en with the only female character is Gwyneth Paltrow. Then The Game, the lead female character in that is, well, she's a prostitute and a waitress, is the way she's portrayed. Fight Club, you've got Marla Singer.
I've been fat like that since grade school.
Yeah. And Panic Room, Jodie Foster and Kirsten Stewart in Panic Room are effectively male characters. They don't have any of the female softness that we would expect to see in a mother and daughter situation. So yeah, I think that he took time to get his head around female roles. So by the time you get to Marla Singer, he's really getting it. So I think that there's just too much.
Or is that casting? Because Helena Bonham Carter, I'm gonna put a pin in this because we're going to discuss this in a few episodes' time. But Helena Bonham Carter, fantastic actress, amazing casting for that role, and the ad libs that she gave. I mean, she's given one of the best ad libs of all time in cinema. But maybe it comes down to the maturity and gravitas of an actor.
Possibly, yeah. And talking
because
about
Gwyneth Paltrow's not brilliant. But speaking of Helena Bonham Carter, and I'm going on a thread here, have you seen one of the other castings that didn't quite happen for an unspecified role?
No.
Gary Oldman.
In which film?
Se7en.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
Wow.
Imagine him in that, because that would have been coming off the back of the Professional, Leon.
Beloved
Leon, the Professional as well.
Yeah.
Here, all of the little insects.
Yeah. The reason he wasn't in Se7en is that there isn't enough air. There's not enough space for an actor of his range. Yeah. The wide, I call them wide. I don't know why I want to call them wide. It doesn't feel right. But Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman play their roles quite clearly defined.
Yeah.
Very structured, very impatient. Then Kevin Spacey comes out and goes over the top. To have a character running the entire length of the film or trying to overarch over Spacey would have destroyed it.
Oldman is so fantastic that in whatever he would have done,
Yeah,
it would have overshadowed whatever that element of the film was. So I think a good call for it. I'm a big fan of Gary Oldman.
Yeah, I think the only part I could see him in is the police captain, which Charlie Emery played. That's the only role I could see him where he wouldn't detract from the film too much. Yeah, so he just pops up, says "fuck" a lot, and then goes out. But anywhere else,
that's what he does in Slow Horses.
Oh yeah, and he's sublime, and he's the best. Oh, he really is.
Just amazing.
Yeah, so we've gone through all that. Then we get to the end, along the end third of the film, where John Doe has submitted himself. He's surrendered himself to the police. They're doing they're getting ready for how this is going to play out, because everybody, the film's called Seven, and at this stage we're at 5, and he's been arrested. And in the back of everyone's mind, including the viewers, is there's 2 more to go. And how are you going to, as we move closer towards, take me to this place and I will show you 2 more bodies, blah, 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 blah. The clock is ticking down, and you think to yourself, well, in the past 2 hours I've been shown 5. How the hell are they going to squeeze 2 in now and make it satisfying? And, you have this, is it John C. O'Reilly, I think his name is, at Scrubs, who plays the SWAT commander. And, you got him in a helicopter, and he's just full of, he's full of gunpowder. Everybody. He's even called California, isn't he? And you just think, Jesus. I bet he chews backy and spits it out. He's just one of those. It's brilliant.
He's like the commando out of Avatar.
Oh, isn't he just? Oh God! But the clock is ticking down all this time, and you've got more displays of how emotional Brad Pitt's character is in the car as they're driving out to the final scene. You've got more displays of how in control John Doe is, how he knows that this is his game. Yeah, and Morgan Freeman in a couple of minutes' time will actually say John Doe has the upper hand. Yeah.
Yes.
Because he's planned the entire arc. Okay, he's had to truncate it somewhat because his apartment was found, but he's planned the entire arc beginning to end, and he knows what's going to happen. So
he knew his end was. His own spoiler alert, his own death.
Yeah.
That's what he'd been going towards, because he wasn't going to get away with any of this. He didn't want to get away.
He didn't want to get away.
This was his punishment.
Yeah. So you've got 2 more to go. You've got Envy and Wrath, and effectively we end up in the middle of what is very obviously a Californian desert. Again, it adds to that confusion around where could this city be, because in the city everything is grey and it's raining all the time, but then 30 minutes later you're in the desert where it's baking hot and arid, and you think to yourself, is there anywhere like that in the world? I don't know. And this is where the film plays some of its best tricks on the viewer. You've got 2 cops and you've got a prisoner in the middle of a desert, and the prisoner's going, it's coming. And the 2 cops are going, okay, I'm starting to get a bit anxious here. What's going on? Delivery van arrives. Delivery van delivers a box. And this is where, when I first watched it, my stomach started to do some really weird gymnastics. I had no idea what was in the box. And, this podcast is called What's in the Box, exactly because of this moment. I had no idea what it could be. And even if I'd paused the film there and then and written down a long list of what I thought it might be, I think what it turned out to be would be very, very far down that list, because Hollywood didn't do that kind of thing.
Well, that's what the studio, the ending was the most contentious point, because the studio ending, did you hear what they wanted to have in the box?
No, go on.
One of Mills's dog's heads would be in the box.
See, right. When we watched this, when we watched this originally, the first time you watched Seven, if you watch Seven when it when it came out or around the time it came out, the fact that it's a human head in a box is shocking. But if you change that ending now to it being a dog's head and showed it to a snowflake or whatever they call themselves nowadays, they would be 100 times more horrified. They would be. You watch the telly or a film nowadays and a dog gets shot and everyone's like, oh my God, but the guy's just killed 40 people. Yeah, but he shot the dog. So yeah.
But it's the way that's delivered when Freeman opens the box, goes back.
Yeah.
And before she died, she pleaded for the life of her baby.
Yeah.
And it's when he strikes him.
Oh, it's rough. It really is rough.
Oh, he didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. His delivery
she pleaded
there
for the life of her baby before she pleaded.
His delivery is incredible.
Pretty little head.
Yeah. He's not.
It's just.
I don't know any other actor who could have delivered it that way.
No, I just think it's super. Usual Suspects. He's brilliant in Kaiser Sose.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That is a fantastic film. A masterclass in acting throughout.
Yeah.
But how he went and got to that is just, you've got to be somewhere else up there to be able to deliver that.
Totally.
It's another space that I don't ever want to go to.
It's another spacey for spacey.
It's space for spacey.
Yeah.
It's just it's phenomenal, and that shows the weight of an amazing actor who can get to that place. Again, put a pin in where he is now and what he's allegedly done. That moment in acting is phenomenal, because you get to that point in the film and you've got the ending, you've got that drive, like you say, which was another point where they hated filming that because it never went right. There's too much ambient sound. They had to redub it, broke it. So much going wrong with it.
Yeah.
But those bits where Kevin Spacey's on his knees and he's just he's delivering those lines.
I'm sure that's what the accused said.
But when he's delivering those lines, and it's the one that stuck with me is the smirk he gives.
Yeah.
It's sickening.
Yeah.
It's to the core sickening.
Yeah. But that is a psychopath. That is somebody who is devoid of emotion, understanding of the impact of emotion. That is exactly what the psychopath should be. Not
totally,
and all this kind of shit. As good as Jane Gunn was in Silence of the Lambs, he's very, very OTT. and even as subdued as Anthony Hopkins was, it's still a grandstanding performance.
Of course it is.
Yeah,
of course it is. But
what
Kevin
Spacey
is a true psychopath, which is
But what Spacey does is Spacey dials it down, and I think a lot of it, yes, fantastic acting, but a lot of it is down to Fincher's directing, saying
totally.
This is a conversation between you and Brad Pitt. You don't need to make it big because there's just the two of you. If you make it big, you're in a desert, nobody's going to hear you. So keep it small, keep it contained, keep it tight. And that's exactly how he delivered it. He delivered with no emotion because he knew he didn't have to use emotion. He just had to tell him.
He didn't play to type. He didn't play that trope of serial killer. You got to be like, woo.
Oh yeah.
Which even unfortunately happens to this day to some TV stuff.
But he knew that Brad Pitt's character was.
I found some web results. I can show them if you ask again from your iPhone.
Thank you, Siri. Not tonight. We have never been interrupted on this podcast by Siri before. If I say it one more time, something's going to pipe up in here. He knew how emotive his character was. So he knew that all he had to do was just push him gently and he'd go right over the edge.
Yeah.
And that was the beautiful thing about it.
And in that moment, I think, I know we've sort of hinted that Brad Pitt was a little hammy at times, but I think his true acting range, darling, came out then, because he gave it that arms out, gun in hand. What's in the box? And then he slumps down and the true emotion comes in. And he's like, I've got to do my job. And it's that wrestling in his head of, I've got to do my job. Oh my God, the most horrific thing imaginable has happened. I've got to do my job. I think I've just finally understood what's in the box. Oh my God, I've got to. And it's that wrestling, that game of tennis he's playing in his head.
Yeah.
Which, it's just, I think it's one of the most tense moments in cinema for an ending of a film, because it's just, it's not been a nice message throughout the film, let's be honest.
No, not at all.
But it reaches its absolute nihilistic end.
Yeah.
The whole film is nihilism, and you've climaxed to absolute nihilism, and it's just horrendous. It happens, and shut up.
That must have been challenging. It must have been challenging to climax to nihilism. Oh, nothing turns me on. Nothing, absolute nothing. Oh, I'm so randy for nothing. Oh,
I'm in the negative space.
Oh, yeah. Nothing.
But you've gone through this just a depressing film to an ultimately depressing ending, and it just stops.
Yeah.
And you just hear the choppers. He shot him. I got shot him. It's gunshots. And you just
somebody call somebody. That's a
somebody call somebody. That's the line. That's what I was reaching for. That's what I was reaching for.
That is an amazing line. So just to clarify then that John Doe becomes envy because he's envious of the perfect life that Brad Pitt and his wife have. And Brad Pitt becomes wrath. Because he is obviously taken by the emotions, puts one in John Doe. There's a beautiful shot, which is obviously, I don't think the word obviously is correct, but I think it's a shot that was done not in the desert because the light and the color changes. Yeah, and it's just John Doe closing his eyes.
Factoid fans. They filmed it. But when they went to film the aerial shots, it was a different time of year, and all the grass it died. So they had to color correct both to try and make it look the same.
Okay.
Because budget didn't allow for it, but they went back at the end, and it was months after, and they said, we need this shot. The studio said, okay, we'll give you additional budget. Yeah. So they had to try and match the shots to color correct them. So that's why there's a bit of discrepancy between it.
Yeah. So he puts one in. John Doe falls over, and then you have him have a brief moment of thinking, shit, what have I done? And then he goes in for a penny, in for a pound, and empties the clip into him. And that's it. And you sit there, the first time you watch this film, you sit there and you go, oh, dear. Amazing film. Absolutely, it's a blunderbuss of a film. It rips all of your emotions inside out, upside down, left, right, back, center, everything. And one I couldn't wait to see again, and one I kept on watching. And the film I've spent more money on than any other film. I've spent so much money on, I've got a copy of the screenplay somewhere, the graphic novels, this, that, and the other. A sequel was written, which was called 8. Everybody associated with 7 went, nope. It went into development hell for a few years. 2015 was made into a film called Solace with Anthony Hopkins, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and Colin Farrell. That turd had legs. The whole idea that William Somerset developed psychic abilities after the John Doe investigation. Now, one film that I think is very, very, very close to 7 is 8mm with Nicolas Cage.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Totally agree. That is a seriously, seriously, seriously uncomfortable watch, that film.
It's a horrible watch.
That film
put me onto that.
Yeah, that film is... It's twisted. It's not a nice film, and I think it's taken a lot of the DNA of Seven, maybe gone too far in parts. Joaquin Phoenix's character is despicable. He's just like, ugh.
Well, it's Cage not being stereotypical Cage, and it's very unnerving.
Yeah,
it's sort of that is a disturbing film. I found that way more disturbing than Seven. I couldn't watch it. I watched it a couple of times. Had it on DVD.
Wasn't it Joel Schumacher?
It was, yeah.
The guy that did Batman and Robin.
Yep.
It goes to show that directors sometimes get it right. So Alien 3 to 7 was Mr. Fincher getting it right. 8mm to Batman and Robin was Mr. Schumacher getting it completely wrong. I think
Batman's got nipples.
I think it's very obvious from what we've been talking about that we are both huge fans of this film. I think it's.
I cannot weirdly praise it enough.
Yeah.
At the time it came out, to me, it was revolutionary cinema.
Yeah.
It was like nothing I'd ever seen.
Yeah, I'd agree.
It was serial killers as they should be, in my opinion, should be depicted on screen.
Yeah.
It's the grittiness and rawness of a proper psychological thriller film.
Yeah.
It just, the pacing of it. I mean, we've not talked about the pacing that much, but the pacing of how every shot, every scene was like a heartbeat. It's just absolutely phenomenal. And like I've said earlier, I feel a lot of Seven is in Panic Room.
Yeah.
There's sort of a leap there. There is a bit in the game, which we'll come on to.
Yeah.
I mean, Fight Club, which we'll come on to as well, is a complete...
Don't say it. You're not allowed to say it.
Fight Club... I've said it twice.
Sure.
Broken the first two rules now.
God, you and your power animal. So yeah,
this monkey.
Phenomenal film. Yeah,
there are elements that go into the next few films that we'll discuss.
Yeah. Okay.
But then I think it sort of trails on into the ether. But Seven is just, it's a bookmark in psychological thriller cinema.
And here's
Until
one.
we get to Zodiac.
Here's one for much further down the line. I think that Fincher read his own handbook when he was directing Gone Girl and when he designed and directed Rosamund Pike's character. I think there's a lot of John Doe in her. That came out wrong.
Interesting.
I think she has a lot of characteristics of John Doe. I don't think Spacey was named in that one, was he? So as normal for the end of the podcast, then looking back at Seven, the character I identify most with is the security guard in the library, having to put classical music on when he was watching the football. How about yourself?
No, I think I'll go with that as well, actually.
Yeah. That's a pity because I was going to have you as the Wild Bill and his leather-touted goods.
That's only at the weekends, Phil. I told you not to bring this up on the podcast.
And that's what she said. So that's it for Seven. We could have done 2 episodes on this quite easily. I'm kind of glad we didn't because there's no way to bore the one listener. Next week is the game, which
so good, so good. It's so good.
You know, the thing that we won't over talk about this now, but going from Alien 3 to 7 was a huge step forward for Fincher. My concern was that he was going to fall all the way back down because he couldn't have gone any higher. So he was going to collapse completely. So it'll be interesting to see what we think of the game when we get to that one next week. So
I'm so looking forward to watching that again.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say.
Okay. So from gluttony, I'm off to go and find a bowl of pasta. Hopefully somebody will tie my ankles to a chair. And from John Doe's missing fingerprints, it's...
detective.
Thank you very much. Take care. See you next time.
Love you. Bye.